noisy cat or a noisy dog, isn't that?
Yeah, it's a little bit snoring.
So I would like to welcome everybody to the EYSIER SIG 7th conference. And I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Professor Marc Beutner, key member of our EYSIER SIG, the Empowering Young Societal Innovators for Equity and Renewal Special Interest Group, for our project to empower young people to be able to fully and freely participate in the civic social contract and look at ways in which we can develop tools and online platforms to allow that to happen. So I'd like to pass over to Professor Marc Beutner. Thank you very much for giving this keynote today.
Yes, thank you, Alison. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for being the host today and to invite me to your session. I will share my screen with you and just give me a second for starting this. So here we go, I hope. So just give me a short hint if you can see my screen. Brilliant, thank you. So hello everybody, my name is Marc Beutner. I'm from the University of Paderborn, and today's talk is about facilitating self-reflection through talk. And if you had a closer look on what was provided before my talk, the title is much longer, so it's facilitating self-reflection through talk to build children's confidence and well-being, as well as a capacity to build their narrative and get to know themselves in communities of all faiths and none in a secular society using ABCDE. And ABCDE is just an approach we created in this EYSIER project. And so I'd like to steer you today a little bit through a presentation of what we gathered concerning the information we could provide you with regard to the combination of dealing with COVID-19, dealing with children's narratives, and also with digitization. So that's me here. It's just a short introduction. As I said, I'm a university professor here at the University in Paderborn. This is directly in the middle or in the center of Germany. And my chair is the chair of business and human resource education. And I have specific research fields. And I just wanted to hint that there is a research field about digitization, and there is a huge research field about didactics and how children and young people can come into a specific positive role in society. So I think this should be enough for me, and I will steer you through today's talk in 3 steps. First step is about self-reflection in times of COVID-19. Then I will have a little focus on examining values and what is about active learning. And last but not least, I would like to wrap up a little bit with some views on benefits and challenges. And so we will start with self-reflections in times of COVID-19. You all know that we have really a huge discussion about COVID-19 now from at least the beginning of 2020, but also already in 2019. And the most important things which are coming to education by this COVID-19 pandemic is that there are 3 specific aspects which are infection control concepts, personal safety elements, and physical distancing. And these are aspects which go through all different areas of life, but also they're active in the field of education. And this means that in education, self-isolation, data collection, tracing chains, or emergency plans, which are elements of infection control concepts, are really crucial aspects, as well as the typical things which learners or young people or children see in school when they're are confronted with mask requirements or hygiene concepts. And when we have the aspect of physical distancing, then we are looking at contact restrictions, gathering regulations, and safety distance. And for education, this means that it's not that easy to come together in a group of learners, but also to come together in a group of teachers or in a group of educators who take care about education. And with these changes with regard to COVID-19, there are specific actions in the field of education, which go from in-school education under specific regulations, where you have to take control about the personal safety, but also about how to take care about physical distancing. But there are also other aspects like hybrid schooling, where some parts are provided in school or in an educational center, and the other part, for example, is provided via online learning at home. And last but not least, there's also the possibility to do complete schooling at home, which means that most of the educational aspects are provided via digital elements. And this is quite challenging for education. And when you had a closer look at the last 1 or 2 years, you see that many people are a little bit in a situation where they feel that this is not that easy to deal with, and so fear is becoming more important for them. And there are specific aspects of fear, and when you have a closer look at the different studies which are currently running through the educational area, you will find different areas of fear which are addressed. So there are some fears in the field of economic stability. So there is a final aspect or a final impact of the pandemic. Moreover, you find that social and psychological impacts can be seen. Many people think that there are uncertainties about the future. There may be isolation requirements, and also they are not sure how to behave during quarantine or during a situation of social isolation. And especially when people like younger children are in a social isolation, there is a breakdown of all contacts or of many contacts. They have to people of other age, other children, but also to other adults, and the social contact field is just smaller than it has used to be. It's used to be, and the next fear is about vulnerable persons, which means that many people are thinking about friends, elderly people, maybe parents, but also about young children which are vulnerable. And so they fear that maybe COVID-19 could bring them into a situation which has effect on their whole life. Last but not least, there are some other fears about the own health, possibilities, how there could be a treatment, or if there should be a healing or could be a healing. Also, there are questions about what are the symptoms. I have some symptoms and I'm not really sure if this is already COVID-19 or maybe something different. And even for children, this situation is quite disturbing. And if they see some symptoms and they are not sure if these symptoms are directly related to COVID-19, it's maybe that they are not sure how to proceed in case of such symptoms. And maybe there are not enough people they have to address, and maybe also the adults are not able to foster the situation or stabilize the situation in a way that it's helpful for the children. So it's also a fear about the protection of others, the protection of the parents, the protection of the children themselves. And last but not least, there's also the fears, what about vaccination? Is this helpful? Is this not helpful? Is it possible to deal with such a vaccine also in a case where the virus is changing and where we have now alpha, beta, gamma, delta versions of the virus, and this is quite challenging for the people as well. And the persons which are working in the EYSIER project and had a focus in this special interest group, they put it in such words like individual experience is conflict on several bases, on a physical basis, on a mental basis, on an emotional basis, but also in a spiritual way. And this shows how COVID also affects our daily life. And with regard to this, we have to have a closer look how to deal with it. And one aspect which is always addressed, or which is often addressed, is to have a closer look about the situation of the people, the situation where people are reflecting about themselves and about their situation, and if it is possible to foster people to deal with self-reflection and also to foster children in such a situation. And this means, according to the approach of Schoen, which addressed such a self-reflection study also in 1933, there are two processes behind this. This is, on the one hand, the reflection in action, when you're taking a measure, when you are in a situation where you are acting, and the reflection on the action itself. So it's a double reflection which has to be dealt with. And these two processes, and to handle these processes in self-reaction, these are the core competencies you have to deal with. And these are the components of the development of expertise in this field. And this means that there should be different people who should have this expertise. These are the educators, the teachers, the trainers, but also the parents, as well as the children and the young people who are in such a situation. So what does this mean with regard to didactics? Also in didactics, there is a strong focus on self-reflection and how we can integrate self-reflection elements in a didactical setting or in a pedagogical setting. And here I would like to have a closer look on the approach of Manty Henderson Watkinson, who used the Kolb model to integrate the reflection elements also in that module, or into these modules which are part of the Kolb model. So if you know Kolb model, there's always the elements of experience, of observation, conceptualization, and of active experimentation. And they took these elements as well. And if you have a closer look at that, there is also the identification of problems, and there is the reflection of the action you are doing. And so they can be divided in two ways of reflection here as well. The reflection in action, for example, between the concrete experience and the reflective observation, but also the reflection in action between this observation and the abstract conceptualization. Last but not least, there is reflection in action also between this conceptualization element and the active experimentation. And if you are running through these four elements, the last action will reflection on the action. So we have two types of reflection: the reflection in the action and the reflection on the action. And we have to foster the learners and the educators to deal with these reflection elements. And I'd like to address now what is meant when we are talking about self-reflection. According to Volkanova, we can say that self-reflection is associated with enhanced self-esteem and independence. And if we have a closer look what that means in our case that we have to increase children's self-consciousness, but also we have to improve the learner's autonomy. And last but not least, the core issue is that we have to motivate the children to do these reflections. And this means if you want to motivate a child to do reflections, you have to be able to do reflections yourself. So it's important for the process of fostering the children that you as adult or as an educator, a teacher, are able to do this self-reflection process yourself too. What does this mean according to other approaches? With regard to other approaches, we can say that self-reflection is related to specific ways or levels of social perspective taking. So perspective taking, this means there is a relation between perspective, selves, and others. And this means, according to Selman, Levine, and Brown-Meisels, that we can differentiate between 5 levels. They started with level 0, where they said, okay, the basic one is that you are egocentric and that there are undifferentiated perspectives. And if you move on and you get to a better focus on reflection, you can maybe get to another level. Level 1 is the level of subjective or differentiated perspectives. So you take other perspectives into account and do not only have a focus on your own personal view. And this is meant for both, for children as well as for educators, teachers, and trainers. On level 2, and you see that level 0 means that there is more or less no perspective taking, and level 1 to level 4, I said there are 5 levels, they are more and more integrating a reflective perspective. So in level 2, we have the first aspect of self-reflective thinking, and we have the difference between self-reflection and reciprocated perspectives. And we have to take both parts always into account. On level 3, we are shifting between a third-person view and mutual perspectives, so that you can get in touch with each other and get information about the other person. And maybe here empathy is more and more important. Last but not least, on level 4, we're coming on a higher level, and we come to a societal approach and reflect on our role as an individual or as an institution in a society. And this means that we can gather all the views in a sort of accumulated vision, but also we can go to another perspective where we can have some in-depth perspectives. So you see that in each level there is a sort of either or, but in most elements it's a combination of both aspects which are addressed. And with regard to Hilson's hour, we can say that self-reflection is an ability to relate one's own strengths and weaknesses, at the same time being able to act critically and, on this basis, to recognize one's own learning difficulties or possibilities. So self-reflection is a process in which we can address as well our strengths as our weaknesses. And the most important thing about that is that we have to be aware of these strengths and weaknesses. And in most cases, educators are focusing not on a strengths-based approach, but on a weakness-based approach or on a deficit-based approach. And therefore, we have to make sure that in a situation where we want to foster children and where we foster young individuals, we have to focus on a situation where we have a stronger focus on strengths, which are usually dropped in a discussion. So what about now self-reflection and the role of children in their narratives? I would like to show you how that could be over a period of time. And what you're seeing here is a time frame which is coming from the past to the future. And here you can see the focus on the present. And most young children have a strict focus on the present. So if they are describing their situation under COVID-19 in school, but also about their daily life, they're presenting their situation with a strong focus on the current situation. So the focus is now and not the future and not the past. So if you're talking to children and if you're hearing clearly to their narratives, you will clearly get the information about some past experiences. Yes, but there is just little information. The core information is about the current situation and the problems or the challenges or the chances they have today. The second thing is sometimes they're talking about near future. They're not so future related. When they're talking about the past, they can make their experience fit to the current situation. But if they're talking about the future does not in fact or have any impact on the present situation. So they are just little information about the near future. And if you have a longer view onto the future or the distant future, the information you will get in these narratives is just smaller. So focus on today, some information about the past, because there are elements which are impacting the situation of today. The near future is sometimes addressed, but the more you're coming to a distant future, the less information you'll get in their narratives. So this means if we are integrating now reflection processes, it's important for an adult, if he or she will get in contact with the children, that the first reflection process is to get a reflection process which is past related. So to make a combination about the situation of today, which is directly in mind of the children, combined with their experiences from the past. And the second reflection process is a future related process of reflection. And here you can first address some aspect of near future, and after that you're focusing more or less on distant future aspects. And it's quite difficult to talk with young children about distant futures or distant future, because for them this is not something they can grab immediately. So it's something which they don't have in mind all the time. And so it's important that the teacher or the educator or maybe the adult, the parent, has to steer them a little bit in that direction. In total, this means that children's personal narratives rarely contain information concerning the ideal self, the duty-bound self, and the possible self. So this is just, these are elements which can be integrated, but they're not directly in focus for the young people. And so it's important, if you want to get more information about that, you have to be careful and walk from the situation, from the present situation where the children live in, back to a step into their experience from the past and then to the future. So there is a direct way in this. So this should be enough for the first part, and I will have a closer look now on ways for transformation concerning valuing. And now I focus a little bit more on the parents. So parents may help or can help to transform children from not valuing their self in the past and the self in the beginning to valuing the self in the past and the self of the future. So a core issue is to get from this perspective where you're focusing as a child on the current situation on other reflection perspectives. And this means that there are several possibilities to deal with that. First approach could be a game-based approach to talk with children. So invite children to play games they know. And while they're doing this, you are involving them into a discussion about the situation of today, because it's not a really good information for a child to say, okay, now we're sitting together, like I put these two people here on the boxes on the upper left, and say, okay, now we're talking about today and the future. And every child will say, okay, very nice. really enjoying this talk. So this is not helpful. So you have to drive them in a situation where they're willing and they're free to talk about that, and that they can steer the situation in the way they like. And this is more possible if they are motivated, and games are often coming with a sort of motivation. And so intrinsic motivation is increasing in such a situation. And this is also going into the talk. And so the talk with the adult can be fostered by the motivation they get from the game. So the motivation is just coming from one situation in the other one. So that's really a helpful approach. Second thing is you can play specific games. For example, a game like Journey into the Future. So we are thinking about, so if I'm sitting there with my child, so I, for example, 4 children, and I would do that with them. I would ask them to explain me if we are starting now a future journey, and there is a possibility to do a time warp. Where should we go to, and what will they experience in that situation? And then I can come up with some elements and say, okay, currently we have a little bit a problem with the virus. What is the situation these years in the future? And what is the difference? And then they're talking also about the situation now and how they think that the situation could be better. The next approach, which I will provide to you, is to create an emotional connection via loved activities. So bring your children in situation where they are, which they like and which they want to have. So if you know something which is loved by your children or by the children you're taking to your talk, it's good to provide them with also other elements. So if you know this is a sports guy, maybe a sports situation could be helpful for that. If you know this is a child who love to be in nature, maybe a trip through nature and some nature activities may be a situation where it is easier to talk also about self-reflection elements. So get them in a situation where the situation outside is nice to them, and this will help you to deal with the talk. So next thing is, if you want to have a specific narrative, maybe it's good to talk about the dream story. So what were your dreams in the last nights? But what are also your dreams for today? When you think about the situation, you are now awake, and you are dreaming of the situation you are in each day. And what could you do if you are in a dream to change that? So this is to deal with the situation in a way which is more interesting for them and brings them into a possibility to change things without them, without bringing them in a situation to be responsible for the things they're saying. Last but not least, there are 2 other perspectives. There is a possibility to do some picture-based storytelling with them, but also to address the problems of the children directly. But in our research, we got the information that the first 4 are more helpful than the last 2. So if you directly address these aspects, it's much more challenging, like with the first 4 elements. So this should be a first introduction, how that could be handled. And the second thing which I wanted to mention is that children will mirror the values and attitudes of those they love and they look up to. So there could be something also like a superhero approach, that you say, okay, describe your superhero. How should he look like? What is your superhero? And what are the characteristics, and what are the adjectives which you can use to describe your superhero? And maybe using these adjectives, you can also describe the situation you are living in and how you can become such a superhero today. Next thing is describe your best friend. Your best friend is usually someone you love or you are used to play with, to talk with. And if you describe your best friend, you can easily ask, and why is this person your best friend? What are the characteristics of him? Why is he your best friend? Maybe they're talking about, yes, he's always telling the truth. Maybe he's responsible. And there are some adjectives which help you to get an information what the child is thinking about and what is important to him or to her. You can also use some digital approaches. For example, there are some other games like this multi-children online group card game. Yes, we created such an approach here in the University of Paderborn. This is maybe you know card games like these football card games, which are often played on in classrooms or during break in school. And we created a game which is an online game where you can create your own arguments and counter arguments about a specific topic, and you can play it like a card game. And if you can bring children to play such a game, you have to focus here on children which are more than 12 years, I would say, because if they're younger, it's quite difficult for them. But then they can play a group against group, and they can play some argument cards against each other. And this is maybe a digital approach. And if you like to get some information about that, I could provide you another time. But maybe this is also an opportunity to combine digital approaches of serious gaming also with such argumental or discussion approaches. And last but not least, what shouldn't be forgotten is that we have to value differences in our own families. So if children are mirroring values, and if they're mirroring people who are important to them, it's good to value also differences in own family, because own family means that if we are in our family are valuing differences and say, okay, we are not the same, but here is the strength of this person and there's the strength of that person, this will also be mirrored by a child in another situation. So taking all this into account, this helps to embrace diversity, to get an approach of cultural awareness, to get more tolerant, to get a little bit open to opposing views, maybe to seek the truth and to come to more realistic expectations. And if we take that into account, we have also to have in mind that there are some do's and don'ts. And if you're coming from a duty-bound perspective and you want to go to a sort of prime principle, the most important thing is that a do is understanding why we do what we do. And a really, really huge don't is being told to do something in a particular way. So don't be the person who's sitting on that box, which I scribbled above here, and say, okay, my little child, you have to do it that way. That's really critical for them because there's no reason usually behind that. And it's not only about logic, it's about getting in a situation where you are emotionally involved. It's not only about getting irrational about everything. So understanding why provides usually a deeper meaning of two things: about building narratives that reflect on consequences of the past that affect the present. And this is the first part which we had in this time frame which I presented before. And the second thing is to inform the narrative building of the future. So this is what I meant before. Start with a focus on the present situation, have a closer look on the experience, and then go on to the situation which a child or a young adult wants to get into the future, or which is the person they want to become. So This has to do directly with identity, and identity is often described in different approaches. There are approaches which are step-by-step approaches, but I'm now focusing on the approach of Lothar Krapman, who provided at the beginning of the 20th century an approach which is called balanced identity. And in the last version of his book from 2016, he presented the differentiation between personal identity and social identity. And you have to have in mind that a child has individuality, which is directly bound to the child itself. So it's this what we call the personal identity, but also there is a social identity. So it's me against my social environment, it's me against my family, it's me against class, but it's also, and this is the other side, it's me in my class, it's me in my family, it's me in society. So it's between, against, and in. And so you have to have an identity if this is balanced. And in each situation, you have to balance between against and between in. And so in each situation, you have to create a new version of identity. And this is quite a challenge for a child. And this means you have to develop at least 4 different aspects which foster identity building. So this is role distancing, ambiguity, ambiguity, tolerance, empathy, and presentation of identity. So these elements should be fostered by the teachers and by the adults to help young people and children to come to a situation where they have a stable balance between their personal identity and their social identity. So this means that you have to make the choice between 2 approaches, the role-taking and the role-making approach. Role-taking means that there are different roles and you can take one and you can act according to that role. And role-making is that you accept this role and you play the role, or you acting in that role in your own identical way. And if you have personal and social identity in a situation, you are shifting more from role taking towards role making. And this is the challenge which we have to foster with our children. So last but not least, the idea for which is behind this identity concept is that if we are talking to children about that, and if we are fostering these development elements A, B, C, and D, they have maybe a sense of language, how they deal with language and how they can express themselves. They're maybe able to get realistic goals to regulate themselves or their self situation or the reflection of this of the children themselves. And there is a self-evaluation process of the past, and maybe there is more security in selfhood. And this means in this challenging COVID-19 situation that we may have the possibility to stabilize their situation in family, in school, in education, but also in whole society. But what does this mean with regards to our EYSIER approach and to the ABCDE project, which we have, or our approach? This is a blueprint approach, and in this blueprint approach, A means that there is a European qualification framework, the EQF framework on level 1, and there is a possibility to ask good questions to solve problems. If we move on to level B, we are on competence level B and focus to explore the best that has been thought and said from explicit scientific, social knowledge synthesis, and synthesize it with implicit personal knowledge, beliefs, and to gain understanding of different definitions of terms. So we're on a term level. And if we move on to a competence level 3, we develop robust methods for data collection, for handling them, and to find solutions in a personal, social, cultural, health, economic, and political way, and to solve problems. And if you have a closer look, all these problems which we addressed at the beginning with COVID-19 are directly elements which here are handled under the section C. If we move on to level 4 and develop the children towards a higher competence level, we can develop series of change from the data as solutions to social and personal problems for recovery. And last but not least, on E level or competence level 5, we develop moral and ethical principles in a new social contract. So you see that on the A level, we are relatively basic, and on the E level, we're acting according to a moral status or to according to ethical principles. So there is a development in these elements from A to E, but if we are mapping these stages, we have also different elements or different ways how we obey rules and why we obey rules. So on level A, we obey rules driven by fear to avoid punishment. And on level B, obeying rules means that these rules are underpinned by our beliefs that they're important and that this is the right thing to do. But it does not know why leading to confusion and perpetuation, poverty gaps, violence, and even war could be a problem which goes hand in hand with this. So we are on a higher level, but we are just underpinning this with belief, but we are not on level, and this is now level C, where we obey rules and choose to do duty within some rules we have. For example, here in our context, we have some classroom rules, or we have rules by law, and we recognize these rules, we recognize law, and we act according to this law. The next higher level is to obey rules, and to do this in a way that we have, for example, our classroom rules, we have our development plans, and we know how to act within that. And this can be tested, improved, and all this can be built on a sort of groundwork of good decision making. And we are always in a situation, also our children, to decide one way or another way. And in all situations, we have to do this decision, and we can do this decision making in different contexts in the classrooms. And therefore, we obey rules, but these rules are context related. And last but not least, in the highest position where we have the moral and the ethical background, we obey rules and connect duties with rights and inquiry into doing the right things. So there is a moral inquiry behind that. We have a specific ethic view, and we arrive at universal ethical principles. So there is a moral development from step A, or competence level A, to competence level E. And so we have an increasing morality between these levels. And this means that we can act in our classroom or in our daily life according to different levels of moral status. And in a classroom situation, this can be combined with different learning principles. One of the learning principles, which is currently under discussion, is active learning. And in active learning, we are focusing on different approaches which should be handled by our children or the learners. So there's always the situation that there has to be a relevance of the task. So there has to be a purpose. The approach of active learning is always a reflective approach, and students' reflection is a needed basic for that. So you have to be on a higher level of morality to deal with such an approach. Also, in such an active learning, there is negotiation. Negotiation about goals and method also means that you're aware of possibilities, and you can be in a situation where decision making, you saw decision making is level D, is also a possibility for the young children. There is a critical way to deal with situations. Active learning is often used in a complex scenario, in the comparison of different learning tasks. It's often situation driven, and it is often engaged with which means that we are focusing on authentic situations and on real life tasks. With classical active learning, we are in methods like critical thinking, doing discussions, doing collaboration tasks, creative assignments, or experience-based processes. But with regard to digitization, we are in a more modern way of active learning, and this means then often what is called deep active learning. And I don't mean now only machine learning or semi-supervised learning. The core element is to provide an approach which fosters the situation of the learners and which brings them additional benefits and to deal with the challenges of today. And one of these approaches is a blended learning approach, which is currently very prominent. And in such a blended learning approach, you have learning scenarios which are online or which are directly related to computer programs. This is combined with face-to-face learning scenarios in the classroom, in a course setting, or in a specific children learning course. And there are also the possibilities to integrate self-study phases if the reflection level of the learner is appropriate to integrate them already on such an early stage. But it's also possible to just combine e-learning scenarios with face-to-face scenarios. You see that over the time, there is a shift from presence to e-learning, back to presence, to have a reflection about the feedback situation. You can use the e-learning scenario, for example, to get to new information and to reflect them in presence and face-to-face with the learners. So you can use, for example, the e-learning scenario to get accustomed to basic information and to come into the reflection process in the face-to-face scenario. You can combine this also with these self-study phases and wrap it up, for example, with another e-learning scenario or with a face-to-face scenario. So this, which you see here down below, is just an example how that could look like. In most of these approaches, you can go with two different approaches, with a coordinated approach or collaborative approach. If you're doing it in a coordinated way, then the learners or the young people are splitting up and everybody is just responsible for one part. You see it here, there are some tasks, and for example, who is responsible for this yellow one is just doing this yellow part, and the green one is doing the green part. And so the general overview about the whole task is sometimes getting in the background. So there is a learning outcome, but sometimes it's fragmented. And so a collaborative approach where everybody gets an information about the parts which also another learner or another young person is dealing with is maybe a more interwoven way, which helps learners or young people to come to a closer view. With regard to digitization and to new didactical approaches, maybe the Paderborn vocational education concept for e-learning series games could provide you some additional help. We are dividing into technical components, didactic components, core principles, and implementing elements. And the core idea is to start with that what we call core principles, and the core idea is to start with authenticity, to invite young learners, children, to learn in a scenario which is authentic to their real life. So real life is directly related to learning scenarios. In these scenarios, it's important to get a multi-perspectivity approach, to have a situated approach, and to get more in a situation where you get into a situation where we act more or less learner-centered. Several e-learning approaches are more or less steered by the system or steered by technical environments. I think the most important thing is that technical elements are useful and that they're important and that functions are really a huge aspect, but without didactical embedding, without adequate material, without situated approaches, you can have the best technical equipment, you won't get the children involved. So it's important to create an approach which addresses motivation, which is based on dialogue and which is action driven. And all this together helps to get the learners involved in a more target group related approach. So e-didactics, e-pedagogy, and active learning with serious games, but also with e-learning approaches are much more than dealing with digital media. It's about the combination of digital approaches and didactic approaches. And I think that today, most approaches are focusing on digital aspects, on technical aspects, but sometimes the social situation, the situation of the child, and how the didactical embedding can be fostered are getting into the background. And this is a thing which should be more in focus in the future. So the focus is on fostering and improving the pedagogical design, and this can be done in different ways, and I just come up with two last examples. I can come up with something like moocs and a mooc approach, a massive open online course. There are different types of moocs. There are these X moocs, C moocs, B moocs, and S moocs. X moocs stands for extension moocs, and this is like courses in higher education where somebody is talking like I'm talking now. There is somebody talking and talking and talking, and there's no feedback from the children. So this is quite critical for them. But most of the MOOC approaches today are working in this XMOOC version. So maybe a CMOOC version, a connective MOOC, where you are trying to promote the development of skills in a face-to-face approach, and an approach where the young people can lead a discussion and can be involved in the discussion and can control their development, is much more helpful, and it's much more constructivist design. So a connectivism MOOC is based on the principles of constructivism. And last but not least, there is this blended MOOC scenario, which can be used in a CMOOC version and an XMOOC version, which combines e-learning and presence learning elements, which I presented before. And last but not least, there's also the possibility, and this is maybe the best possibility for young children, to come up with a small, massive open online course. And this sounds a little bit crazy because small and massive is directly the opposite, but this means that the principles of a MOOC, a massive open online course, can transfer of a small group. So maybe the maximum of persons which are here in such a small MOOC is about 30 persons. And then you have much more possibilities to come into a reflection process. So the best feedback we had to be in our research, and the combination of the SMOOC with a CMOOC, where you have a constructivist design and a small group. So this is just a first idea. So this reflective approach can be done in all these MOOC variables, but I think that from our research, a combination of a CMOOC with an SMOOC is best fitting for young children. So last but not least, I will provide another idea for schooling under COVID-19. This is a DISC approach, is a streaming model which we created here under the COVID-19 situation in the last year. So it was designed in 2020. And this is an approach which is a step-to-step approach. And on the first hand, it's quite easy for as well the learners as well as the teachers, because in a classroom, there is a teacher standing directly in a classroom, and you can split the class in some people who are at home and some people who are in the classroom. So the distance restrictions are much more easier to be addressed when you have less people in the classroom. But on the other hand, if you have you need just a small tablet where you can stream the situation from the teacher in front of the blackboard also to the people at home. So you see that in DISC 1, the communication is between the teacher and the students in the classroom, as well as between the teacher and the learners at home. But it's a directed version and it's very basic. So there is not many technical requirements needed. It's quite easy to do. DISC 2 is to enhance the process and to get also feedback, not only from the class back to the teacher, but also from the people at home. So in the first DISC 1, there's only streaming to outside the classroom. But now we can get feedback, for example, via a chat back to the classroom. And here also just a sort of tablet is needed, and we tested it in different classes, and this was quite easy to establish. In DISC 3, the communication process is also between the learners at home. So you can do learning groups at home, and they can work in the classroom in groups and also at home into the group. So while DISC 1 and DISC 2 are more teacher-centered versions, DISC 3 and DISC 4 are more learner-centered versions. So it takes more self-control and also more self-reflection to come to DISC 3 and DISC 4. So according to the class you have in mind and the children which you have, you can start, for example, as a teacher on DISC 1 and move on to DISC 3 or DISC 4. In DISC 3, the communication is between the learners at home, and they can, for example, have a chat between each other. And the groups in the classroom can work on some topics in the classroom as well. And this will be presented to the class. And the only thing you need now is a beamer or a presenter where you can show the pictures of one who's presenting from home also in the classroom. So a version which we have now, for example, a Zoom conference, will help to do this DISC 3 version already. And in DISC 4, there's also the possibility to do a communication also between the learners in the classrooms and the learners at home. You see, the interaction from DISC 1 to DISC 4 is increasing. The technical requirements a little bit increasing, but it's all based on a streaming module which is quite easy to handle. And you can handle this approach. Oh, sorry, here the light is going out. I'm not sure why. Hey, so I have to wave a little bit because the control panel here is by moving and by action. Sorry about that. I hope you can see me now again. So you see that the technical requirements are quite slow, quite small and not that complicated, and that according to the needs of the teacher and the competencies of the teacher, technical competencies as well, they can start on DISC 1 level, DISC 2 level, 3 or 4. And also the requirements about the self-reflection of the learners is according to the DISC levels. And we can move from a teacher-centered approach to a learner-centered approach. And I think this is also a possibility which can help to cope with situations which will be in the future as well, because I don't think that all situations with regards to COVID-19 will go away immediately. So it will take some time. Therefore, it's important to be aware of some elements which we have to have in mind. So benefits are to have a sort of role model for the children, to be a role model as an adult, as a teacher, to put knowledge and skills into practice, and to handle this in a situation where you can live together with your children in a situation where they know that you are expecting the same from the children, which you are also presenting in your daily life. The most important thing is that you activate children on different levels. And you see that, for example, with the DISC approach, that there can be an increasement of interaction, an increasement of action and activation, that you address different competencies. And the most important thing for me is to create an emotional connection to children. This is a core issue. You can combine this with game-based approaches, which I addressed earlier, to get additional motivation. And you can also use digital media. But the most important thing is to address children on an emotional level to get them involved. And doing that, we had in all our research an increasing of identity concepts, an increasing flexibility of the children, children which were more tolerant, which were acting according to a higher level of ethical principles, as we described in our ABCDE differentiation. We could see that the approaches are able to fight fear in the situation of COVID-19, to foster the methodology or the methods which the children are using for problem solving. And last but not least, it was always a possibility to get them into a situation where self-reflection was more in focus after this this narrative with the children than before. So I hope that this was not too much at the moment, because I talked a long while, but I hope that I could give a sort of rough overview how that could go hand in hand in this really challenging and complex topic. Thank you.
Professor Marc Beutner, that was an absolutely outstanding cutting edge keynote. We are incredibly grateful to you, and as a leader of the EYSIER SIG, for sharing your wisdom and your research with us. I'd like to pass over to our panel. We've got Maya Minalte, Mesa, Baldwin, and Daniela Canfrota. Colleagues, do you have any questions for Marc or any comments that you would like to make?
Okay, let's start. Thank you for this brilliant, literally brilliant presentation. So much information that I had to sit down, think and reflect. As a teacher now, I had to reflect on my teaching. I work at the University of Qatar, and I teach education technology and teacher training as well. And I had to reflect, what am I doing? Am I reflecting? Am I letting my students reflect? Which I do make them reflect. But again, I started thinking, have I let them reflect, or did I push them? Or did I give them things that I wanted from them to reflect on? So like you said, let them be a reflective person, let them have their own identity when they're reflecting, and let them have their, like you said, personal in and out. And as a teacher, like you said, let's look at the, not only the weakness, let's look at the strengths that they have and how we can help them be better citizens or better teachers in the future, because when I teach them how to reflect, they will automatically take it and they will show their students, they will be their role model on reflection. So thank you very much. It was brilliant, literally brilliant. I have one question, one small question.
No problem.
Okay, brilliant, thank you. I use digital in my classrooms, and because of COVID-19, and so we were using Blackboard, and Blackboard has a lot of interacting, there's the polls, but it's very hard to motivate adult learners, students which are over the age of 19, let's say. It's so hard to make them open their cameras sometimes. It's so hard to make them interact with you, even when you give them websites to have a look at, then to come back into the classroom and reflect on it. And it literally kills me when I have to call by names to open their cameras and to interact with me. So how would you think that, or a platform that is brilliant to make those learners interact or motivate them to be a more productive, active students when it comes to online learning?
Yeah, I think that this depends a little bit on the topic you're talking about. And I think that in several cases, it's good to provide them with a task before the classroom situation. So I really like the idea of flipped classroom situations where you provide the learners with some information right before you're teaching, that they get into the topic before you're dealing with them, so that you're coming directly into a reflection process when they are back. Because if you're providing them with a flipped classroom approach, the challenge for you as a teacher is that you have to provide them with the materials before, and that you have to make sure that every learner, or not every, but most of the learners are accustomed to dealing with the materials, but also that they're reading the materials. So usually when we used approaches like that, we try to come up with a combination of different channels which we had in mind. So we are not presenting just text-related versions, but also created a combination of pictures, of infographics, of texts, and of videos. And this helps, at least according to Fleming, it helps to address different types of learners, to find their not easiest but preferred way to deal with the topic. And then maybe not every learner, or everyone who likes to participate, I would say, is in the situation that he or she read everything, but that she or he is accustomed to discuss with you about that. So I don't think that everybody has to be aware of each material. Over the time, yes, but at the beginning, it's important that you have a discussion basis. And it was really successful for us to provide them with materials which address different media channels. And so we could also divide our learners directly when they're back in our teaching lessons into some groups where we said, okay, we are now in a pro-con discussion, and please take this role. And you were addressing, that's the reason why I said at the beginning, it's a little bit related to the topic, but you said you are mentioning learners which are over 19 years old. So there is a level of rationality in people who are above 19, and you're not talking about people which have to be educated how to deal with a text, I would say, usually. So, but I think that not every learner is really enjoying reading, for example, or enjoying to deal with longer texts. And this is the quite challenging moment. When it comes to digitization, I would say here is the possibility to come with different task types. So usually we're coming just with multiple choice items or something. that's quite nice, but when you ask learners, they would say, oh, a little bit boring, huh? And maybe if you're coming up with some pictures where you put hotspots on the pictures, which come up with additional information, they're much more activated to deal with that, to hover over, to get information. And I'm not really a fan of somebody who's supporting learning nuggets, so just small pieces of learning. Yeah, but for a beginning, for a start, this is quite helpful. I don't think that you can put everything in small learning units, but small learning units at the beginning to have a basis for a first discussion. This is right helpful, and therefore I really have good experiences with flipped classroom approaches where you provide first additional first material which is related to different media channels, which is combined with digital approaches. So for example, that you provide them with something like a Padlet where they have to provide their own ideas on the net. And that in the first session where you are talking about that topic, that you're not starting with, I explain you now the definition of, but you're starting with, you read or you heard about that. What is your experience about that? And you start with getting them involved directly. And then not every time, but usually they're more motivated to go on and to see also when you are providing different media channels. Also, the feedback of your learners will be different. So some focus more on that material, some more on that materials. And this helps you to create a more effective discussion, because you know what is happening in all these materials, and you can directly address people who came up with a specific idea where you know this taken from that approach and from these materials. And this was quite helpful for us. I know that this is not that easy to integrate in a learning platform like Blackboard, because in Blackboard, for example, you have these huge courses, but if you integrate that at the beginning of a session, where you have this as a sort of opener, as an icebreaker, I have really good experience with that.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for this. Thank you.
Yes.
I spent the day with Jim Honeyborn today and his wife Jean, who made a really delicious lunch. And he has written a book that focuses on debating, which is on the website, and I'll put it out as a link with the Facebook. And he develops sheets that the young people can actually investigate the topic that they're going to debate using the ideas that Marc has just suggested as a flipped classroom. So it starts with an inquiry, what do I need to find out? And we can have an intended learning outcome that maps to the competences. And of course, this then is about the assessment for personalized and social learning that John Dewey and many others have talked about, and that we draw on with the EYSIER. So this is a fantastic contribution, Marc. Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out an aspect which was addressed a little bit before, because you said that there are so many people are not answering, or they are having just a black screen, and you can't move them towards turning the video on. This is quite a challenging situation, but you have a similar situation also in a normal face-to-face classroom situation. Because if you ask them, do you have any questions, then most of the learners won't raise their hands and say, okay, I have this question here. No, usually they're quiet. And this is what also happens when you're in a digital environment. And in a digital environment, there's no direct control because you don't have everybody in the eye, because usually you have these small pictures and not of everybody who's attending. And then it's quite easy to lean back and say, okay, let her talk and see what will happen. But if you integrate feedback sessions from time to time, there is this sounds a little bit crazy, but it is like it is. It's a sort of control element. It's not forcing the people to do something. No, but it's if you address from time to time, and there are questions which refer to what happened before, the people are usually after a while more open to be active in your courses. Usually this happens when you are talking for a long while, like I did now, but this was now a talk here in such a scenario, but not in a classroom scenario. But if you would do something like I did here in a classroom scenario, I would say it's not surprising that most of the people would get asleep. And I would say it's quite okay to do that, because the most important thing is to get them active from time to time, and to make sure that they feel that their experience is needed to move on. So gathering experiences and gathering information from the learners is much more important, I would say, in a digital scenario than in a classroom scenario.
True. So
Usually this is what we are referring when we are thinking about a classroom scenario. Okay, we're collecting information from all our students. But in a digital scenario, we often forget that the most important thing is to activate the people. And so a short feedback, which can be just a small question which I raise, and where everybody has to wake up and type something in. Yeah, this is helpful. And often the teachers are forgetting that.
I've tried that, Mark. I've tried it a lot with my students in Qatar. Suddenly I say, okay, well, I said this, who can answer? Yeah. Then I pick names and they all say, oh my God. Yeah. And they say, doctor, yeah, I was there, but what? Repeat the question. I say, oh, you weren't there, you know, trying to tease them sometimes and joke with them. Yeah. The problem is that, like you said, we have the culture, or sometimes the countries that, like you said, we have a lot of technology out there, but we should just pick one that suits the context that we are living in, and that promotes what the learning outcome that we want from it. I totally agree, because sometimes we are pushed into lots of technologies, lots of platforms, and then we as trainers, as teachers, we get confused, and we confuse our students. And sometimes you don't know what's the outcome of that platform.
Yeah.
So
it's not all about functions.
Yes. That's true. Or the latest technology or fashion. It's what do I want from that platform?
Yes. And I'm not against digital media, but we have to have in mind that the most important thing is to get a sort of emotional bridge to the learners, and not to get a only functional bridge to them.
So true, so true. I totally agree, because they like you said, there are lots of platforms. It's the best platform that you as a teacher are happy to use, and you know how to use it technically, you know, because sometimes you get this platform and you don't know how to use it, you get frustrated, and then the children don't know how to use it, and it's all down the hill. So using one platform that suits you, you know how to use it, your students know how to use it, and you're getting the outcomes that you want from that platform. I totally agree. I just want to tell you something, Marc, because I worked in a context like in Qatar University, where I mean, even here, before here, because I worked at the University of Leicester as well, it's up to the students to open their cameras. And being in a context where sometimes it's not, they don't want to, because of the culture, because of the society, so they don't open their cameras. But thank God that they were all active with me, and because I used that platforms, I used to talk to them and I made them interact with me. And just by listening to their voices, I started to recognize X, Y, Z. And when they came, because in Qatar they're online teaching, but when it comes to exam, we see them face to face. So they started to come to the classroom and they would say, Salamu alaikum, hello, as a sign. And then I'd say, oh, you are X, you are Y. And they said, how did you know? I said, from your voices, I don't see your faces, but the voices and the way, and the more students because in the classroom, I had 60 students in the classroom, and 60 people, you don't have them on the monitor,
No,
but the people who 10 or 15 of them that would always answer questions, and sometimes I'd pick people that I've never heard their voices, just wanted to hear voices, and they said, oh my God, you're clever. I said to them, yes, I didn't use my eyes because I didn't see you, but I heard you all. So like you said, it's how you interact with your students, how you motivate them, and use that platform to support them and to support the A, B, C, D, E that we are advocating all the time.
Yeah, I think it's sometimes challenging to get them to the E level because
yes,
ethics and moral on the highest level, this is quite challenging for them. But I think it's really important to move from a lower level up to a higher one, and to get them in a situation where you can examine on what level they are, because it's not only to move forward, but every learner is maybe on another step on these levels, and maybe we have to have a stronger focus on what can we do to foster different learners which are on different levels or on different on different sub levels, maybe to move on to come to another way to obey to rules in different scenarios. Yeah, this is quite challenging because usually we always think there is a class and we can do the same thing to all of them, but this is not how it works.
This is where differentiation comes in.
Yes.
And there where you can use different platforms for different students.
Yeah.
So
sometimes for some students it's quite good to do some groups with them, because it's not only that they are learning from us as educators or teachers, it's also that the interaction in groups help them to get role models and to take roles. And what I meant with role making and role taking when I addressed the Krapman approach, this is also a thing which you can create in small group learning scenarios, which can be integrated in digital versions as well. So the idea is, I really love blended learning approaches, because then you can have deeper reflection processes in face-to-face situations where you can directly see your people and see that maybe somebody is looking that way, and this is what is sometimes the thing when we are only working on digital platform, or what gets lost. And so a blended learning approach is often really useful, and that was also the reason why I think that the combination, for example, when we tested moocs, that the blended moocs with such a constructivist design were much more useful for the learners to enhance their competencies in the fields of ethical development than what we had in the fields when they had a more instructional design. I think most of the didactical approaches, or in quotation marks, didactical approaches, I'm not sure if this is more or less a technical approach then, they're referring to an instructional design, and pure instructional design is fostering, but it's not in our research, it was not that helpful than a combination of constructive designs, designs in combination with reflection processes which could be integrated in such blended learning scenarios.
I can't wait to read the research, literally.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Marc, for the presentation. And also thank you for bringing up the flipped classroom idea, because most of the time is not, this idea is being dismissed in education and literature. And it's really very much it's very much linked to digital technologies rather than an approach. Yes. It's an approach to learning, because you don't, if we were still in normal circumstances, you can do flipped classroom without using technology. You can provide material students so that they can revise or just look at, or just something to provoke their thinking before coming to class. Or even during class, it needs like 5 minutes in the beginning of every period, you know, just to trigger thinking. But if the flipped classroom was also taken by itself and applied with digital technology, I think we can optimize the use of it. And especially if I was lucky that I was one of the teachers that adopted the idea immediately once I heard of it. And once we moved to remote teaching and learning, it was easy. The transition was so easy for me. It wasn't easy for other teachers and learners, because this was a totally new context, new approach, that as if you're throwing these learners in a pond and tell them, and in a sea, and tell them to swim. You know, it's just this is very difficult for everyone. Now I have 2 questions. The first one is going to be short and depends on how much you can listen to me. I have a second question that might be a bit longer. Now, regarding the presentation and the models that you have presented, and especially the ABCDE model, what do you think are the challenges that might be encountered in implementing these ideas or models that you have described, especially if we are talking about the example that you gave, this online streaming model, when we are encouraging teachers to use it, and this, I think this is basically challenging their beliefs, because I think as a teacher, if I wasn't in research, I would not understand what's the meaning of a behaviorist perspective and a constructivist perspective. And knowing that I have learned all my life in a behaviorist model and traditional teaching. And then once I started teaching, I was a traditional teacher as well. And it took a long time for me to change my beliefs. What do you think are these challenges, especially when we're dealing with teachers who need to change these beliefs?
Maybe I can answer from a project of mine, which I have at the moment. It's a project SAFE. And in SAFE, we are testing the streaming approach now on a broader basis with schools all across Europe, not all across Europe, but in several countries. And for example, there is a school which is situated in Czech Republic. And they're, on the one hand, not that used to technical environments and new technical environments. And they're also focused on a language learning approach. And they're doing that, or did that, in a more or less behaviorist way. So this is similar to what you asked. And for them, we created a specific teacher training course. Because I think you're perfectly right. It's not that easy to change your mind about dealing with pedagogic approaches. And often you are transferring your experiences from the past in your own teaching methods. And at the beginning, it was quite challenging for the teachers, because they were not used to the technical environments, and we did that with them with Streamlabs OBS, which is streaming software, which is not that complicated, but if you're not used to streaming softwares, it's pretty new to you. And so it was pretty new to the teachers there as well. And so it was the first challenge to deal with this new technology. And on the second hand, we tried to foster constructivist designs also in their teaching methods using this streaming approach. And I would say the first 2 months, they were doing it just in a behaviorist way, because they were just adjusting to the technology. And when they got more used to the technology, then they shifted also their methodology. But this was supported by specific courses. So I think that further teacher education courses are really needed in that scenario at the moment. But this is quite a challenge, because at the moment, I think most governmental institutions are happy when the technical environment is running. And that's the reason why I said often we forget that there is a pedagogic and didactical approach which is in reality really more important than the technology. But if technology is new, the people focus on what is new. And so, yes, I have to admit that it is quite challenging, and that in our experiences, we try to deal with the technology first and then make the change in the behavior and in the methodological design.
Yes, thank you so much.
Well, did you have a second question?
Yeah, I'll let Mayam, and I'll give the floor to Mayam.
And are you okay with this? Sorry, I thought you finished. I just want to add, because Mark, I'm doing the same project that you have just said, which is SAFE. I'm doing it with Hornby, which is the British Council, and we're looking at teacher training in Iraq and Mosul. So what we're doing is, because what Iraq has gone through, and especially Mosul after the war, and then ISIS went in, and then the teachers do not know how to use a computer. They don't know how to use any programs. So like Word or PowerPoint presentations, and they go into the classroom and they just lecture, and that's what it is. And they memorize, the students memorize. So my project that's been now, I'm nearly done, thank God, I've nearly finished it and they loved it. I have been teaching around 12 teachers how to use platforms. Of course, they're English language teachers, so trying to embed, using PowerPoint presentation, we taught them how to use PowerPoint presentations and embedding videos in these slides. So for example, if they're talking about something which are to do with mall or pronunciation, they can just click and they can make the students listen to them, or even see these places, especially in places, in urban places in Mosul. The thing that I felt is, when I first started my project, is like you just said, is I went to these teachers and I asked them, what is it that you want to learn from technology? And they said, everything. We want to know everything. Okay, but what is it that you don't know how to use? They said, do you know what they told me? Some of them said, I don't know where the switch for on and off button. And the thing is that you want to learn everything, but you don't know how to use an on and off, or you don't know how to even open a laptop or a computer, or you don't have that. So we had to look at the steps of how to, first of all, what a computer is like. We had to go into showing them what a laptop is, and then we had to go into teaching them, Microsoft Office and so on. This is being.
And sometimes it's good not to drive a Ferrari, but to take a bike, and you're coming to the right place.
So true, yes. So that became the behaviorism, then the constructivism, and then the digital approaches, then the pedagogy, the methodology, then looking at the curriculum, how to look into the curriculum, how to embed the curriculum into those PowerPoint presentations. So it is a struggle. It's a struggle. I mean, like my colleague Mesa said, she was the fortunate ones that was doing this. So when COVID-19 hit everybody and hit her school as well, hit the school, she was easy to transform, and her students knew this. But the teachers that did not know, it was very hard for them, difficult, and not only for them, it was difficult for their students. Let's go back to these countries that did not have technology, that did not have platforms, that do not have internet, that do not have electricity. And then COVID-19 hit. So that was trying to adapt everything, the behavior of the teachers, the students, the new circumstance that everybody's going through, which is COVID-19. And they needed to be in school, they needed to get educated, they needed to have those curriculum to be finished, because if they don't finish, they don't get paid and so on. So that was a nightmare for those teachers. And I remember literally 2019 when it hit, and I had lots of calls from everybody from everywhere in Iraq telling me what do we do? And I was still a lecturer. I was still a lecturer here, and I was still finishing at the University of Leicester. And I was so much, oh my God, this is what they do in the UK. Can we do it over there? No, we cannot, because we don't have the bubbles. We don't have we don't. So it was a very big thing for us to transfer our lives to the new life, which I looked at you said that you're in your module disc 1, disc 2, disc 3, 4. You said that we might not use it anymore because we're going to go face to face. We might not use that, but we should always have a plan B. So, I mean, we can have a look at what you're doing, take that and have it, store it, because we don't know what's going to happen in 3 years, 4 years, but have something that Marc said, and we have it here, and we can use this if anything happens to us. So that's what I just wanted to add. Sorry, Mesa, I took your...
No, actually, you introduced what I was going to talk about, because maybe this is not relevant, and to some extent it's relevant because it actually like hits the education system. But I'm a Lebanese woman, raised and lived in Lebanon, moved recently to the UK, and the first time in my life I feel like I'm being treated as a human here. In Lebanon now, on Thursday, the whole population is going on strike because there might not be bread anymore. So one French channel asked the question, is the national mood a one of fear right now? And someone answered, it's not remotely the word fear that we can use. It is rage and it is despair that is wreaking havoc on the Lebanese people with immeasurable consequences and no corrective steps whatsoever from the political class. And when we say immeasurable, this means that even experts are having a hard time measuring and estimating how deceitfully severe and deviously bad this crisis is, which is getting worse by the second in Lebanon, before COVID even hit the country. So the Lebanese pound has lost 95% of its value, and the central bank reserves have dried up and no longer supporting trade, and Lebanon is chiefly an importer. It is a country that imports with the highest trade deficit in the world. And because of the dreadful political class that deals that they have struck with banks, which led to this situation. Now, as we all know, what Nelson Mandela told us is that education is the power to change the world. So if you want to destroy a nation, you destroy the education sector. And once the country is in an economic crisis and affecting every single home, every single house, every single person, every single child, this means that now people in Lebanon, what they're going through now is that prices have tripled and quadrupled. There's hyperinflation, which is a rare phenomena anywhere in the world, but it's this daily thing now for Lebanon. Now the national exams that are useless actually have been cancelled because students and parents do not have petrol to go to schools. They cannot buy papers, pencils. They can't buy copybooks. They can't buy books. We don't have electricity. And electricity now is from local generators, and the generators now, people who own generators are destroying each other's generators. So they don't have access to internet. They don't have light. So in all of this crisis, and I'm sorry to explain all of this misery, but it is my duty to voice out what my people are going through, even in a very small talk. How can we, as people, as teachers, encourage self-reflection in these difficult times? How can we convince our students that we still need to learn, we still need to be educated, because we want to make a change in the world? So, and I think self-reflection of what you spoke about is the most important thing that it's the thing that is only left for us, that no corrupt politician can steal this from us. They can steal the money, they can take the electricity, they can take food, they can take everything, but they cannot take self-reflection. How can we as adults, as mothers, as parents, as teachers, help students to self-reflect and be strong physically, mentally, and emotionally, and spiritually, as you have mentioned, that to overcome these difficult times?
Yeah, I think this is really challenging, because in a situation like this, it's about a situation where your core needs are addressed, and if you are losing core needs or are not able to find solutions for your daily life, it becomes really critical. And I know a similar situation from my colleague from Togo, where they have also the problem that they will foster education, and they want to try to deal also with situations like COVID-19 and so on. But that the living situation, the social situation in that country is so complicated, like you described for your country now as well, that it is sometimes challenging for them to make sure that people understand that education is a key to future.
Yes.
And I think it's better to get just a few persons involved in that process than to get none. And I don't think that in such situations you can involve everybody, but this is not possible due to their daily life situation. If I would be hungry, or if I had no possibility to work, maybe the situation is so crucial for me that I have to focus on these aspects first. But we have to have in mind that without fostering the educational system and fostering the learning processes of the different individuals, there is no way out of such a situation.
Yeah.
And I totally agree to your statement, which where you referred to Nelson Mandela. This is a crucial aspect to focus on education, and that education stabilizes a social system and stabilizes also a political system. And therefore, I think that even if it is possible to address just a small group, I think over the time the number will increase. And I think this is the only way to come out of such a challenging situation. I know that in such situation, digital competencies also are not the most relevant things you have to address. So, but we have to have in mind that, and this I would like to emphasize, that education is one of the key factors, and that it is not only to focus how to handle a political system. Only if you are able to reflect on your situation and the situation in your country, you will be able to do changes. And I don't think that another country or another educational system can come into a country and say, oh, you have to handle it that way.
Yes. Yeah.
We can help to with things like DTZ or whatever, which provide help to create an educational system in such countries, which provides more people with educational background and which offers possibilities to reflect on the situation. And there, the core issue is that we have some best practice examples where we can say, okay, here are some people who where you can see that a change is possible and that there was a possibility to get in a better position, to get in a better status, maybe to be more comfortable with the situation where the people are living in. And I think this could be a helpful example for them. Yes. But example does not mean that you should do it the same way, but that you can get hope and that you can rethink what could help you in your personal situation. But I really agree this is right challenging.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Marc.
So, and it's not only to do it with support systems. So there is a mental aspect, there is a social aspect, and there is, and this is what I mentioned also in my talk, the emotional stability. This is the crucial thing. And to make learners feel that a teacher or somebody who takes care or tries to take care feels that it is important to have emotional connection to the people which he or she is addressing. That is what I would say in such a situation, but I think it's really challenging. I agree.
It's very challenging, Marc, when you go to a place like Mesa was saying now, and you bring those students and you tell them, come and sit down and learn. And they say, why should we learn?
Yeah.
Why should we learn if I cannot provide, I cannot help my dad and to provide for the family? Why should I learn when I see X and Y who do not have certificates and they are in very high ranks? This is what Mesa is talking about. Lebanon, Iraq, Syria, Yemen, we are facing because of our corrupt governments, let's say. The last thing is that they think about is education. The last pot of money, where do they put it, is in education. And you see people like Mesa, like me, who live outside the country, try to find projects, try to find funds, try to find people who help us and go and do those projects in schools. I am UK, I'm British, but I'm Iraqi at the end, and I want my children in Iraq have a good future. I want my children in Iraq, the children in Iraq, to have a prospect life, like the children in Europe, like the children in America, like other children. But we are, let's say, teachers in Iraq, Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, are trying their best. They are trying to get students back. They're trying to make education important. They talk to the children. Some of us, we went and knocked on doors, come back to the school. COVID, okay, bring a mask, put a mask. Why? Why should I go? Why? Why? What am I going to get out of this? When I'm going to schools and then suddenly the Ministry of Education says, well, there's no exams. Well, these children they've all passed, they've gone to the next year without studying, without reading.
Yeah, also the certificates, just like, distributing certificates.
Without studying. This is what's happening in Iraq. I'm sure this is happening the same thing with Mesa, because when I went to Iraq, our children did not go to school, but let's say he's in year 10, has gone to year 11 without going to the classroom, without studying, without probably just for a month or 2 months, and then corruption, they sat at home because of COVID, and then another thing and another thing, and then they're not bothered anymore. Why should I go? There's going to be, there is no online, there's no obligation for them to learn, there is nothing out there for them to, or there's nothing out there for them to tell them, come sit down and learn because it's important. And when you tell them it's important, they look at you and they say, why? I don't know, because I'm passing, the next year I'm passing. And then at the end, I'm going to go to university, I'm going to get a certificate, and I'm not going to do anything with it. So that's when you said it's the personal identity, the social identity, we need them to reflect. But teachers, like Mesa was just saying, teachers, how do they reflect? Because they cannot get paid to feed their families. They cannot get jobs, or their children are sat at home, they don't learn. And that's a problem that we are facing. So I'm sorry, we went out from digital technology and so on to something that it's like Mesa was saying, it's something that we as teachers in these corrupted countries, are still fighting, are still there. You can hear from Mesa's voice, my voice. We are still there. We are still wanting to help our teachers in Iraq and Lebanon. We are still wanting to get projects to help those children, to make them understand. Well, I'm one of those people that go ask for projects. I always have proposals. I go into places. I go get some funds, and I go into Iraq, even if it's war. In 2017, went into refugee camps, got the children back into schools. This is what we are. This is what teachers are. We are always there to help our students, whatever the circumstance is.
Yeah, what we really want is that we want these teachers and students to have access to these presentations, these models, and to use them, because the government and this access has to be through us, because the government will not allow it. The government anyway is not interested, and this is not something that they want. They do not want to educate the people, because if they educate them, they will not vote for them. So this government, this lord wars and mafias that have been ruling the government for years and decades now, are the ones who are stopping. There's so much money that can be invested in education in Lebanon. Lebanon is not a poor country. Lebanon has a corrupted government.
This is very true, Mesa, and this is something that we've looked at in our paper that we published in the Journal of Groundwork Cases and Faculty of Judgment. And we also published the paper with Mayam, yourself and Daniela. And what we've identified is there are some serious issues of corruption. But I think what Professor Beutner's presentation has shown us is that there needs to be that reflection, there needs to be that emotional connection, and there needs to be that hope. And my Palestinian colleague, Professor Khalid Arar, and I presented on the autonomy of local leaders in districts who can broker between a national education offer and what communities need. And I think this is more about what Professor Beutner is saying and about how do we connect with people. And if we have platforms that are digital, maybe we can reach out further if generators aren't being broken. And I think what we have now is an agenda to take forward, because I'm also looking at issues in Africa and the African Union wishing to silence the guns. So there are big issues in terms of COVID-19 recovery, in terms of silencing the guns and violence, uncertainty, chaos and ambiguity. And there is an agenda that we are looking at with Horizon Europe in terms of democracy and education, how we can use models like ABCDE and Marc's incredible work on MOOCs and the digital platforms and the games that look at identity making, not just identity taking. I'm not going to do what you tell me, I'm going to become the person who understands myself and informed choices. So if I may, colleagues, I'd like to contact us all at the end of this presentation and see how we can move forward with an agenda for a next series of EYSIER 6. And I'd just like to thank Professor Marc Beutner from all of our colleagues and our listeners on Facebook. Thank you so much for such a thought-provoking and state-of-the-art presentation. It really is an honour to hear you speak and to have worked with you over this time, Professor Beutner, and to have published with you. And I just want to really show our appreciation for you giving up your time today. And colleagues, if we can move forward with this in future EYSIER 6, I think it's time to say with hope that we will move forward, and that just a big thank you to the panel and to you, Professor Beutner.
Yeah, thank you, Alison. Thank you for your comments, for your questions. And I would say it's most important that we see that educating children and young people as agents of positive social change is a core issue today. And that there are different challenges in the future, but that I would say that even if there is the situation that the children are maybe in a situation where social change is not that easy to reach, that it is important to get some experiences and to use such experience also for future measures. I think without any measures, we will not be able to cope with such challenges. And therefore, thank you for inviting me. Thank you for hosting me. And it was really a pleasure to be here.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Drs. Daniela Cavrota, Maya Menalte, Mesa Baldwin. And now, colleagues, I say good night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Have a nice evening.